All right, welcome back to the third and final video of this series where we are dockerizing our Node.js application and we are storing or pushing rather the Docker image to ECR. Now, there's one thing I did forget to do in the previous video, which is if you look at the amount of commits or pending changes rather, 521. Okay, that's because we didn't do this. Right. So we're gonna write. We're going to say ignore all the node modules, which will leave us with really the core files of the application. And so the question is, how do we start with the pipeline, right? So what we're going to have to do for GitHub Actions, for GitHub to catch or to recognize that there will be GitHub Actions, what we need to do here is to create a .github file. Inside of that, we are going to create another one called workflows. Okay. And inside of that, we're going to have a YAML file. Now, we could call it anything, but I'm going to call it buildspec.yaml. Now, this is the file that we use to set up the pipeline, essentially, right? And there's a couple of properties that are necessary. So one of them is the name, and then we're going to have the property on, and essentially what that entails is what event do we want to trigger this pipeline, and in our case it'll be when we push our changes to GitHub. Now I'm going to just give it a name, and I'll say it's Express.js API CI pipeline. You'll notice I keep calling it a CI versus a CI/CD pipeline, and the reason for that is because this pipeline doesn't really deploy the image into any environment. All it does is that it integrates the code after all the good stuff like testing and whatnot. It integrates the code into the base code that then will be built out into an image. So hence I keep calling it a CI. Then the next thing is we're going to give this thing permissions, right? What kind of permissions do we want it to have? And in terms of permissions, it's only going to be able to read the contents. Then we're going to have a couple of things. We need environment variables. Remember, we created secrets earlier, and this is the section where we'll pull those secrets into the workflow. And then we're going to have jobs. Jobs are going to be the steps involved in our pipeline. So let's start off with the environment variables. So the first one we're going to have is AWS access. I think what I'm going to do to avoid any errors here, let me just come here, because it can be so easy to make mistakes here. So I'm going to come here, go to secrets, go to actions, and inside of actions I'm just going to copy these over, right? Copy these here. Cool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the $, and then do secrets dot the name of the variable. Okay, let me just copy this a couple more times, because I think we have about 5 of these. 5, right? Cool. Then come here and copy this one here. Let me just, okay, cool. Then the next one we're gonna have is the region. You'll notice I have it's not required, but it's just a preference where I usually have the access keys, the secret, the region, then the account and repo name. And then we've done that. We're gonna do this secret key, essentially the password. Then we're gonna do that, and then the last one we now have to bring up is the ECR repo name. Okay, cool. Now, cool. We're done with secrets. Now, what we want to do is we want to start working on the jobs themselves. Now, in terms of the jobs, we're going to have a couple of steps. We're going to have the build step. Once we've done the build step, we'll have a test step, and then we'll have a Docker image push step. Okay, start off with the build step. I don't know I don't know how much you've worked with GitHub Actions, but in a step, we're gonna have to. There's a couple of properties that we need to do. So one of them is name. We need to name it, and we'll call it build. Then we'll choose the runtime, or the operating. Yeah, I guess the operating system, which is Ubuntu. Then in each phase, or in each job rather, there are steps, right? And for us, we're going to have mainly two steps. There's the step where we check out the code, and then there's a step where we essentially are installing Node.js packages. So I'm going to call this one checkout, and then says now every step uses some sort of action, and the action we want to use is called checkout, and the version we're using is version 4. Okay. Then we're going to say name, we're going to say install, we're going to install Node.js, and it uses actions / setup node at version 4 as well. How? Let's say no. And then what we're going to have to do here is we'll have to do node version, and we'll do 18. And then the last one we'll have is we'll have again name, and we'll install dependencies. And then what we'll do here, we'll run a specific command which will install the dependencies. Perfect. Now that's the first step. Then the next one, like I said, is the step, but remember we haven't written any tests. So for now, what I'm going to do is we are going to give it a name. I'm going to say unit tests. Okay. Then we're going to give it that. In fact, it's going to run on Ubuntu as well, so we might as well just copy this, bring it here. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say it needs, meaning there's a dependency on the build step, on the build job. So this can only run after this is done, right? We're building some sort of dependency. Then in terms of steps, the only thing we're really going to do, I'm just gonna get this one here, right? And I'll explain this. I'll explain why. We're not gonna do node, and I think for now, let's install node in this one as well. Yeah, let's do that here. Cool. Yeah, and then the next step would be to then do the test, but we're obviously not going to do that now, simply because we haven't written any tests yet. So the last one we're going to do is this Docker image push. Like the others, it's going to have a name. It's going to be Docker. I'm just going to say Docker and ACR essentially. ACR repository. Okay, like the others, it will run or runs on Ubuntu latest, and then it'll need test, right? And then there are steps involved. The first one is obviously to check out the code, and then we'll say users, as you've seen, actions, checkout, and the version is version 4. Then the name of this one is going to be build and push, right? So we're going to build, meaning that we're building our Docker image here. And then we're going to run a few commands. So because we want to run a few commands, we're going to do the backslash, and then so there's 3 commands we're going to be running. The first command is we're going to be logging into, I'm going to log into ECR first. Once we get into ECR, that's going to be stored, the credentials are going to be stored in Docker, and then Docker is going to use those to then push the image into ECR. So I'm going to say AWS ECR get login password -- region, and I'm going to say the region is going to be coming from our secrets, but I'm passing it here as I'm calling it from the environment variables, right? And then we're going to say docker login -- username AWS -- password stdn AWS the account _ ID dot dkr dot ecr dot the region dot amazon aws.com. Okay, and that's going to help us log in into ECR. Then Docker, we're going to do Docker build, and then we're going to tag it, and we're going to say AWS _ account _ ID dot dkr dot ecr dot $_ the region dot amazon aws.com, and then we'll say slash the ECR repo name. Did I name it correctly? Let me just check here. Yeah, repo name. And once we've done the repo name, we'll then do another $, and what we'll do is we'll get the SHA or but basically what happens is that for every commit, GitHub creates an ID for that commit, and so what we'll do is we'll use the ID as the tag for this Docker image, and then what we'll do is we'll then push it into we'll essentially push it into this into ECR, okay, like this, like so. Sorry, and obviously the file that we're going to be using, I almost forgot, that's quite an important thing. So yeah, let me run you through this again. So what we're doing is the first step is that we're logging into ECR, right? We get credentials, they get stored, and I'll show you in the pipeline. It'll state this as well. Then once we do that, we then build the image. We essentially tag it with the name of the repository, with the I want to say the DNS of the repository, the name of the repository, and then as a tag we put in the commit ID, and then we build it from this Docker file, because this Docker file would be in the root level of the pulled in code, and then we push it into that repository with obviously the latest tag. So yeah, I mean, if you do have any questions on anything else, just leave it in the comments. But then once we've done this, we'll probably have to do some debugging here. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to push all of this into GitHub, and then we'll probably have to come back and clean things up. Usually things don't work the first time, so we'll come back and there must be a typo. We'll do some debugging. Okay, cool. Now let me push all of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and say what did we do here? I'm just going to say we set up GitHub Actions. I'm going to say workflow and Express API. That's what we're going to do. So I'm just going to commit, say yes, and then we'll just give it a second. And you'll notice when I commit and push, we're going to start having a process kick off on the GitHub side of things. So let's just sync that. So let's just sync that quickly. I'm glad we did the node modules in the .gitignore file. Can imagine how clumsy that would have been. This thing's taking forever. Okay, cool. There we go. Patience is a virtue. Right now, if we go to actions here, you'll notice that we've got a pipeline, or rather a workflow that's currently running. And if we come in here, there's all the steps, right? Sorry, the jobs, right? So it's now building, it's going to do unit tests, and it's probably going to bomb out. So we're going to bomb out over here. Our flow is not working as it should. Again, we'll debug, because that's, essentially we want this to first finish and then this to finish. Okay, so yeah, told you this is probably going to bomb out. So we'll come back in the next video and clean it up. Let's look at the problem first. Okay, cool. It's fine. We'll come back. So this is more of a Docker issue versus. Let me just check here. Yeah, so this is more of a Docker issue more than an ACR issue. Okay, that's fine. That's proper. So in the next video, we'll come back and clean things up. Thank you so much for watching. This took longer than I thought it would. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video, right?